Welcome everyone. So today I wanted to explain to you the queen versus a 7th rank pawn. As you can see, this pawn is just on a next move, you will just promote it. So how you will stop this thing? Okay. Only two principles you have to remember, only two steps to this. Step number 1. Whenever the king is not in the front of the pawn, you will give the checks, especially through the files. And when the opponent's king is in the front of the pawn, in that situation, just because the pawn cannot promote it, you will move the king closer to the king. Now here, as you can see, the king is not in the front of the pawn. We will just bring the queen for the check. Okay, queen to d5. If you want, okay, I can show it to you with this check also. Check, king to c2. Again, as you can see, king is not in the front of the pawn. So what I can possible? Checks. Now, of course, see, I'm just keeping the things simple. Of course, the computer will say that this check, that check. I'm just showing to you that how you can stick with your principles and you just mate it out. So why we are bringing the queen closer? Otherwise, how we will mate it? Again, king is not in the front of the pawn. Check. And it should be file wise. Generally, you have to give the file wise, because in the rank wise, for example, you will give the check on this rank, like you will just promote it. Okay, so I'm just eliminating that fact, that risk from your end, that you just focus on the file wise, or maybe sometimes diagonal also, but just keep it aside the rank wise checks. King to c3. Once again, it's not. Now here you can play a little trick, that is this check. Why? Because it's a double attack. Yeah, of course, the tricks you can try. Once again, the king is not in the front of the pawn. Check. And after the move here, you can play this one also. The point is over here is what? That now the pawn cannot promote it because queen will take it. This is also possible. So king now moves on a t1, protect the pawn. Again, the king is not in the front of the pawn. If you move the king, he will simply just promote the queen. So queen d3 check. And after the move king to e1, now you can see king is in the front of the pawn. Simple, bring the kings in. When he will moves up. Now example, you cannot play the move this check. Example. So over here you can insert the move diagonal check. So to make a distance, and then you can go to the file wise for the check. Example, you don't want to go to this check. Okay. Of course, over here queen to d2 is also possible with just holding the pawn, because it's a pin, so cannot go with. But I'm just, as I said to you, the two steps which you have to follow, the two principles which you have to follow, you just focus on that. There is a check. King moves on f1 maybe. Now once again, king is not in the front of the pawn. Give the file wise check. King to g2. And again, we can go for the double attack. Because if the king plays somewhere else, I will just capture the pawn. King moves here. This is check. Now if the king moves inside, of course we will bring the kings in. And if he moves here, I can play this one also. Because now the pawn cannot promote it because queen will take it. King will go to f1. This is check. Now of course he has to go on at e1, because if he goes to a g1, simple queen will just take this. And whenever the king is in the front of the pawn, now he cannot promote it. So we will just move the kings in. And the same thing will continue. This is check. Again, as you can see, it's a file wise check. And king is protecting. So opponent's king cannot take our queen. And of course, when he goes in, simple the king inside. And when he moves away, now finally we can capture the pawn, because king and queen both are attacking. And after this move, the king moves here, and this is simple check. Always remember, if the opponent's king is on a b file, which is knight file, queen file, king file. Again, the knight file, it is a way. If your bishop, if your pawn is on the bishop file, okay, like this one, or maybe the rook file, so it's a theoretical draw. How is it? Let's just see the position. Over here, black has a bishop, the bishop file. So of course we will give the check. King moves to f1 because king is not in the front of the pawn. So we just give the check and he's like, okay, I go to the front of the pawn. Now, so as I told to you, when the king is in the front of the pawn, bring your kings in. So king f5 because that moment he cannot wait. King to g1. Now he wants to promote the queen. So whenever the king is not in the front of the pawn, you will give the check file wise. King to h1. Again, the king is not in the front of the pawn. And example, he give the check. Of course, it's a double attack because he is attacking on the king as well as the pawn. Again, the king is not in the front of the pawn and white will give the check. And here the crux comes that after this move, he can leave the pawn. That okay, capture my pawn. The point is, if you take the pawn, it's a stalemate. So because of this one, if the pawn, the 7th rank pawn is a bishop pawn, which means the pawn is on the bishop file, it's a draw. The same thing we will see if it happens with the rook pawn. Now again, in the rook pawn also, the situation example, this is check. King moves here. Example, it just moves here. Okay, I move the compound. Okay. Now the black cannot move the king because the rule which we are following, that whenever the king is in the front of the pawn, we will move our king. But here you cannot move the king because it's just a stalemate. Because the king cannot move to the another side. Right? So this is the reason that over here this is just a stalemate. Like okay, so check, king moves, king is not in the front of the pawn. Okay, so it's a check, king moves here. Okay, the check moves here and nowhere. Like okay, file wise check, it will just goes in. Like okay, because queen to c1 is not a checkmate. The king has a g2 square, and when the king is in the front of the pawn and in case the king moves, it's a stake. So simple. If the opponent has a knight file pawn, queen file pawn, king file pawn, knight file pawn, it's a win. And if the opponent has bishop file pawn, okay, and the rook file pawn, it's a simple draw. Thank you so much for watching.